All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here with Nina LaCour. All righty. All right, we can just get right into it. It's 1:02. Let's go. All right. So to introduce the wonderful author who's joining us today, this is Nina LaCour. She is a best-selling author of 5 critically acclaimed young adult novels. We Are Okay, Watch Over Me, Hold Still, The Disenchantments, and Everything Leads to You. Her first novel for adults, Yerba Buena, was published in February of 2021 or 2022. I'm like, what is time? Nina now lives in San Francisco and loves cooking, gardening, and day tripping through the ever-inspiring regions of Northern California with her wife and their daughter. Thank you so much for joining us, Nina.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm in my dad's office in his house. We're staying with him for a few days, and so I'm getting used to the new setup here. Thank you. Okay, good.
All right, so congratulations on your adult fiction debut. I'd love to hear about the publishing experience and how this differed from your young adult novels.
Sure. So, I started writing Yerba Buena many, many years ago. Actually, before I even started writing my YA novels, I had the idea for this book. And I had no idea what the story was, but the character of Sarah came to me first. And then Emily came to me shortly thereafter. And so both characters have been kind of alive in my mind for many years. And I used a sample of scenes, like early scenes that I'd written, exploring those characters in order to get into grad school. And then when I was in grad school, I took a class on writing young adult fiction. And when I was a teenager in the 90s, like there wasn't the kind of YA fiction that there is now. Like there were certainly some great books, but there wasn't like the breadth of literature. So in grad school is when I really started reading for the first time young adult novels and fell in love with them. And so I switched my focus during that time and wrote YA. And all the while, like my, Sarah and Emily kept being alive to me in my mind. And I would kind of sneak little times with them in between my YA book contracts to see like if I could really make a novel of this. And then during like the beginning of the pandemic, when everything shut down and we were just in our house, I decided like, this is really important to me. I really want to try to write this book. And so I basically started over from the beginning and figured out what the book was during that time. So it was quite nerve-wracking to go from YA, where I feel very like comfortable and established in that world. I've published many books. I've been with Penguin Random House for a very long time, to like a whole new terrain. I had never tried to publish an adult novel before, and it's a whole different world. Like it's different editors and different imprints, and some editors really read YA, but some of them, like the adult and YA world, are very separate. So it really felt like going out there for the first time again, when we sent them out to editors. And I was so happy and relieved that, publishers were interested. And so it has felt kind of like, even though it's an extension of my writing career, it certainly has felt like a new beginning in a way.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear that Yerba Buena was a story that lived inside of you for so long before it even came to be like the book that it is. I'd love to hear more about the inspiration and kind of background behind the story and these characters. I mean, in reading it, it seems you're so interested and thoughtful with the aesthetic and design and renovation and restaurant worlds and processes. So could you share a bit more about that? Was there a restaurant specifically that inspired Yerba Buena? Because I feel like the herb itself even is just such a connecting thread between the whole like characters and storyline.
Yeah, gosh, I love that question. I think there had been a restaurant in my idea of the book for years. Not really based on any particular one, but just I love going out to dinner. Like I love the experience of being in a beautiful place that's like curated for guests to come and just like enjoy their time there. And so I'm just kind of really fascinated by that experience and how one of the like themes or just kind of running ideas through the book to me was like just kind of like wild natural beauty versus this like very constructed curated beauty. And in a way that's like not saying that one is better than the other, because of course like there's natural splendor and that's just like pure and incredible, but then there's also the way that as humans we can like seek to create beauty in our worlds and our lives. And that's very much both Emily and Sarah's journeys in a way. So it wasn't a specific restaurant, but it was definitely just like an extension of how much I love being in those spaces and how much beautiful homes, whether they're, a modest studio apartment that's made to be beautiful or a mansion, it doesn't matter. The grandness doesn't matter, but just like how much people love and tend to what they have was certainly something that I was thinking about a lot. And at the time when I was writing it, my wife and I had just bought a apartment in San Francisco, and we had thought that we would have time to renovate it, but we didn't because COVID struck. So we had gutted like the place. So we gutted the kitchen. We had like torn up all the old carpet and like laminate floors. Yeah. But then it was shelter in place time and we couldn't do anything. So it was like a construction site, like, but not active. Like we were just sitting in this place with like torn apart walls. And so that was a really, it was not fun to like live in that state for so long, but also it really put me into like Emily's point of view in terms of like, here's a starting point. Like, what am I going to do with this place? What decisions will I make? And how do we want it to look and feel? So I was kind of sitting inside the book in a way, like inside this house that had been kind of torn apart. And then my wife is an amazing mixologist. It's not her profession, but it's like something that she loves to do. And so one of my favorite things about writing the book would be I would have like my evening writing session and she would come in with this like beautiful cocktail for me.
That's so cute.
Yeah. So that was really fun. And, I think it's just kind of like, in so many ways, the book is just an appreciation of how creating beauty in our lives can help us through difficult times and painful times and give us so much, joy and satisfaction.
Oh, I love that. How is the apartment in San Francisco now? Did you get
that is part of why I'm here in my dad's office, because it's still being done. But we're almost done. I think we'll be able to move back in just a few weeks. But it's going to be really beautiful. And I have to say, like, working on the book and imagining, like, I picked blue tile for my kitchen, just like Emily picks for her.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
So the beginning of this book opens with a very jarring and profound trauma. What made you choose that journey for Sarah? I know you thought of this character like for a long time. Was that opening always something that you were thinking of?
No. When Sarah first appeared to me as a character, and like in my writing, sometimes characters just appear fully formed who they are. And sometimes I really have to figure out who they are. And Sarah was one who appeared fully formed to me. And I knew she had a little brother. And I knew that she carried like a real, heaviness and trauma. And I knew that she had abandoned her brother when he was young. And I also knew that she was devoted and loved this brother so much. So it's like I had all of these pieces, but I didn't know the specifics of what happened to her or why she would make the decision to leave him. But I knew it would have to be something really, really terrible for her to not stay with her brother. And so those were the questions that I had when I started writing. And then I found the answers as I explored. And I really struggled with it, to be honest. Like I feel, especially, this is a queer book club, so, I can talk about the specifics. Like, I didn't want to fall into these stereotypical things where, like, the queer characters, there has to be some sort of tragic death that keeps them apart. And even though Annie and Sarah are not the central love story, it's still something that I really grappled with. But as I continue to think about it, I was like, this is what the story is asking me for. This is like shaping this character's life. It shapes her relationship with Emily, to have had this like early love that was so intense and then has gone so wrong. And then that she can have this like beautiful redemptive arc, for her life. And I also feel like we're at a time in queer literature where like these things that we couldn't do for a while because we had to like course correct. I think like now it's like, can't we tell all stories, and not have to worry so much about like, I feel like as a writer, I want the expansiveness and the freedom to tell whatever story comes to my mind right now. So that was an interesting process for me to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of ties into my next question, because one of the things I so appreciated about Yerba Buena was that sexuality was, present and important, but it wasn't a point of tension for the characters or their storylines. It was never a topic of conversation. It just was. And I feel like stories that feature small town America or families that are rooted in the South are, those stories often place sexuality at the forefront as a point of contention, where there's a coming out narrative or a rejection narrative. So was this a deliberate choice for you? And, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I've never been like in my own writing, I've never been interested in writing a coming out narrative. I think maybe it's because my own coming out was pretty uneventful. Like I am fortunate enough I've always lived in the San Francisco area. Like it's not that it wasn't a big thing in my life, but it wasn't something that caused any like strife in my life. So I've been very fortunate in that way. And so I'm just more interested in like not needing to, in my own, like I think that there's such an important place for coming out narratives and novels about that. But for my own work, that's just not where I gravitate. And I'm also just very interested, I think, like in not like in terms of using language to like categorize or define our sexuality. Like I'm personally also interested in just kind of like we're all humans and we all have, we're all different. And so I wanted to just be able to explore where Sarah and Emily go and, who they gravitate toward and what it means to them to be in a romantic or sexual relationship with another person. And just to me, it's like examining that is similar to examining like what their passions are in life and how they choose to grow in all of these other ways. So I really wanted to focus on like the whole person of each of them, and like this whole, it's a 10-year journey. How do they define themselves? How do they, or define like what they want from their lives? And what do they just feel comfortable and at peace with, and what do they grapple with? Like I see Sarah feeling very confident in her sexuality. Like she never questions it. It's not something that she, thinks about or wrestles with or anything. Except for the fact that she's had this horrible loss when she's so young. So it makes sex different for her. And not intimacy is harder for her, having come from such a troubled childhood. But Emily is more like actively grappling with like, what does it mean to be queer? And what does it mean to be Creole? And what does it mean to be able to pass in all of these different ways? And so I like that she was kind of more focused on these aspects, and Sarah is just kind of like living her life.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'd also love to hear more about the character of Grant. He's so interesting, and I would just love to hear more about any of his backstory that you're imagining. Like, I could read an entire book about Grant. And I love that he and Sarah had that like little moment of potential recognition later in life, but they kind of were just like, we're in our own new places now, and I see you, and I'm just gonna let you go on your way. So anything you have to say about him, I would love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I love him too. I did kind of wish that he could have been a bigger character in the book. I would have loved for him to come back in a bigger way, but I felt like he was kind of like just one of those relationships that you have in a moment of time that's like incredibly influential, but not meant to be a lifelong relationship, you know, something that's just meant to be like someone who you needed in the moment, and you go through something together, and then that's it. I felt like there was something kind of poetic and beautiful and also kind of heartbreaking about that situation, that not even if it's a real true bond and friendship, it doesn't mean that it's meant to last forever.
Yeah.
So I mean, in my mind, he's just, I think he is someone who had a really hard coming out story and was rejected by his family and was seeking, you know, people who could be his people in, you know, various ways. And I truly believe that he has found that. But, you know, it didn't end up being able to be a bigger part of the story. But it's also, I find kind of interesting too, because every interview I do, Grant comes up, I find, or like at least in every like book club that I've been talking to, which I really love, because I think even though he's only there for a short time, like he's a big presence in the book. And when I was working on the dinner party scene for Sarah's birthday, I had no idea that she would bring up Grant. And I actually had a whole draft where she didn't bring him up. And it was just kind of about like Emily and Colette cooking the gumbo and hosting the party and making it really lovely. And I didn't have the whole story that Sarah told, but then I felt like that was a really nice way to bring Grant back in and kind of let Sarah think about him and let myself as like the author show more of like the impact that he had on her life. So I was glad to have that moment.
Your book has such rich side characters that really help construct Sarah and Emily's journeys. Like, I feel Emily's friends as well, when they're helping her through the apartment to the house to her grandmother and jobs and school, like the support that they give her made them such wonderful characters for me as well. So yeah, I don't know. There's no question there. I love the side characters.
Thank you.
So I read that your Creole background and family made its way into the book. And I just would love to hear more, in your own words, how that informed Emily's character and the story, and, you know, what you included in yourself for Yerba Buena.
Sure. Yeah, it's been really wonderful. So like I'm Creole on my dad's side. So my dad's side of the family is from New Orleans. They moved from New Orleans to Los Angeles as part of the Great Migration. My dad was the first one born in LA. So my aunt, his older sister, was born in New Orleans. And I just grew up really close to my grandparents, and hearing their stories about New Orleans and about like starting over in Los Angeles and what that was like. And I have never figured out how to like include it in a book, but it's such an important part of my identity. But it's such a kind of specific culture. So I felt like if I was going to include it, I wanted to be able to explore it more on the page. And so having Emily's whole storyline, where she really finds kind of answers for herself and what she wants from her life through studying her grandmother's journey, really was like such a gratifying part of the book for me to write. And that's the closest to true. I mean, it's a totally fictional novel, but like Claire's house is my grandparents' house, and my grandmother had just died right before I had been writing, like a few months before. And so like I had that experience of going into that house for the last time and seeing the wallpaper and all of her things and like their furniture and, saying goodbye to that house, which they had lived in my entire life. So it was such a huge, goodbye for me. And so I got to use it. I used the love letters that, Emily reads to Claire. We have lines from the love letter that my grandfather wrote to my grandmother. I just completely quoted them because they were so beautiful.
Oh, that's so
And
wonderful.
oh yeah. I mean, so that was really special. And then all the houses that like they had, that Claire and Emily's grandfather lived in, were the ones that my grandparents lived in. My dad kind of helped me through like figuring out where like the progression, like once they came to California, like the progression of houses. And I remember my grandfather once drove me by the Compton house, where the scene where Emily and Bass lie down and the airplane goes over them. My grandfather drove me by there once. And so it was just like really nice. And my dad has been teaching my brother and me how to make gumbo. So that kind of got to come up in.
Incredible.
Yeah. So I loved being able to use all of that. And the book that I'm working on right now is also like, it's very much a Creole book because it takes place in the 50s and it's like, it is in New Orleans and Los Angeles, and it is like these people making their lives. And so
you have anything more you could share with us about that? That sounds so wonderful.
Well, yeah, thank you. I'll tell you, I'm very excited about it. It's my first historical fiction, so the research has been like quite intense and a little it feels quite different to always be thinking like, oh, is this something that she would say in the 50s, or is this something they would do? But it's very queer. It's Los Angeles 50s. Yes. And I'm just, yeah, it's been very, very fun to do it and very different. It focuses on this one woman who's the youngest sister of her family and she's in her early 20s, but she has a baby and is a widow because of the war, but is, mostly in love with women. And so we get to follow her through navigating all of that in the 50s. So it's very like domestic. For the first time I'm writing about like motherhood, which is really cool for me. I have a 9-year-old daughter. So it's opening up a whole bunch of new things that I haven't gotten to explore yet in my writing.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Sapph-Lit will definitely be reading that because
good.
Absolutely wonderful. I adore historical fiction. Is it going to be like in the adult vein as well, or will it be
yes. Yeah, it'll be with my same publisher, with Flatiron again.
I love Flatiron. They're so wonderful.
Yes.
When I emailed your publisher and I was like, would Nina be open to a Sapph-Lit interview? And she said, Sapph-Lit needs no introduction in this house. And I just about died. I just about laughed.
I love that. Yeah. Amelia, my publicist, is amazing.
Yeah. She is. Okay. So what chapter or section took the most time for you to write out? Because there were multiple POVs with Sarah and Emily, and then there were also these alternating timelines. So you have, Sarah's childhood and like a long scene with her getting out of town, and then you have just like a glimpse for Emily, and you kind of get more of her backstory through flashbacks like throughout the novel. And I'd love to know more about the decision and how it was writing those.
Yeah. So the structure was really what made this book so challenging for me. I knew that I wanted it to be, dual POV, but I didn't know how to do it because it covers so much time and it's not at all even. It's like, as you mentioned, like, it's not like we have Sarah's teen years and then Emily's teen years. It's like, we have like a lot of Sarah's teen years, and then we have a lot of Emily and like her affair with Jacob, for example. Like, we have like Emily in her early 20s figuring stuff out, and Sarah more in her teens and then like mid 20s. And So it was just kind of a nightmare for me to figure out how to structure it. And that kept me from, working on it for a long time because I felt like I had to figure it out first. But then I realized like I had to actually just let go of that idea and just write and then just see what I had and see how I could piece it together. So, Sarah's first big section was certainly a tough one for me. So much happens in that, like it's the most eventful part of the book. So much like heavy, terrible stuff happens. So that was an area where I really kind of went back and kept trying to figure out. And then the other part that I kept going back to was just the sequence of Sarah leaving to go back home and Emily, during that time too. And so like there's like the phone call that Emily makes to Sarah and the voicemail that she leaves her. And I knew that I needed them to be apart at this point in the novel, but I didn't want it to feel like it was just a plot construct. And I really wanted it to come from like inside both characters and follow like the patterns of behavior that they have had for so long. That was really important to me to make it like very much something that would really happen in real life. And we do these things, right? We miscommunicate, we miss each other in some ways. And so that was something that I kind of kept reworking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was definitely a relatable part of it. I was just like, yep, I'm gonna fall into these old patterns.
We all do it.
Yep. So one thing that I would love to know is, Sarah and Emily both have like very clear aesthetic choices and tastes. This is kind of an odd question, but do you know what their favorite books would be and what books they would make each other read?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll say Passing for Emily. That's a big one in the book for her.
Oh, well, yes.
Yeah. So by Nina Larson. And I love that book so much. Like that's why that's there. So I'm going to say that one for Emily. For Sarah, I don't know, James Baldwin just came into my head. Maybe like Giovanni's Room or something. Like it's about a bartender.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So my mom read this book. She reads whatever I tell her to read. Shout out to Stella, we love you. But she absolutely adored it. And I texted her, I was like, so I'm interviewing the author. Like, do you have any questions for her? Anything you want me to ask? And she said that the women in this novel are so strong and the men really aren't, with very few exceptions. So can you share more about like writing the strong female character?
Yeah. I think the women are resilient.
Yes.
I think that they have real weaknesses. Like Sarah certainly runs from her problems, right? Like she's devoted to Spencer, but she's not willing to, until like she has to, she's not willing to like go home, face her past, like she's not willing to like make that her home again or make a home close by and like be a steady adult presence in his life. Like she can't do that. Like she's very strong in a way. She's very strong in terms of like her survival instinct is strong. She's going to do things for herself that give her a steady life and like the stability that she wants. But I don't think she is very strong when it comes to facing her past and like being there for her brother. She gets there. Like that's kind of part of her journey through the book is getting there. And then Emily, I don't know. She's not the strongest either sometimes, I think for both, I think it's like both journeys are to places of real strength for the characters, but I think it takes them a lot to get there. In terms of the male characters, I think Spencer is getting there too. Like he's making different decisions in his life than Sarah, but I see him as a kid with like I think things are going to go okay for him. I don't think he's going to live like a, straight and narrow, like 9 to 5 job kind of life. But I
No
think,
way.
yeah, I think in terms of like, he's so kind to his girlfriend and like caring, to her. He's honest with Sarah. He has to wait for a long time for Sarah to be at a place where she is able to like hear what Spencer has to tell her about their father. And, I think he's a character who's going to live his own kind of life, but with integrity, and probably some trouble mixed in. But yeah, and like I'm very interested in just people's flaws. I mean, I think Jacob's just like kind of a jerk. Like I'm not going to redeem him.
Het personified to me.
Wait, say that again.
He's like het, like compulsory heterosexuality. To me. Like that makes sense that you would be attracted to him. Absolutely.
Yes, totally. Yeah, that's such a great point. Yeah, so she grows out of that, but it seems like, right, it's like he's like this cool, attractive restaurateur. He's in this position of power and influence. He's what everybody, want, like all the waitresses like want to date him. It's just, yeah, like you put it perfectly. Yeah. And Sebastian is flawed, of course, the father, Bass, the father, but he has a good heart. He's like, he's there, for them, but he doesn't always know how to follow through. And so I don't know, I guess I see them all as kind of flawed, but also, strong in their own ways. But
I will pass along your response to Estella.
I love the question. Thank you.
So speaking of, some of the men in the novel, why do you think Sarah's dad drew Annie like that? I know that, the family game of them drawing a scene and then each of them continuing it was kind of a way of communication for them, since clearly the family has trouble with communicating in general. But it's so cruel and it's so twisted, and it feels as a reader to be more traumatizing to Sarah than the death of Annie itself. So I'd love to hear more about that decision and, the kind of intent behind it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one. He's a very troubled man, Jack Foster. And he, I believe in Spencer's assessment at the end that it was meant as a confession. I think probably, I'm like, if I'm being as sympathetic, like the most sympathetic view of Jack in that moment is he really didn't want Sarah to hold out hope. Like, he didn't want her to, he tries to tell her and, in words, like she's not coming back. Like, this isn't like when people disappear this way, they don't come back. He knows she's not coming back. So he doesn't want, Sarah to hope and search. And, he is no stranger to losing people as well, right? He's lost his wife. So I don't think it was out of cruelty, but for Sarah, like, I'm deep in Sarah's perspective in that first thing. So in Sarah's perspective, like what else could it be other than a taunt, like other than just like the most cruel, horrible, thing that he could do to her when she is trying so hard to hold on to hope that they'll find Annie and she'll be okay. So, I think a lot of the book is about miscommunications, and that's a very huge one.
Yeah, absolutely. The other question my mom had for you was, do you envision Emily and Sarah ever taking a trip to Sarah's hometown? What do you see for them in the ending? Is that like a possibility for them to visit her past like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this trip home for Sarah was very cathartic. I think, it was hard for sure, but, she has so much that she does there. She reconnects with her friends who are still there and who take really good care of her. I loved writing the scenes with her friends. I loved having her ride in the back seat and like be there in Lily's dad's church and like have hot chocolate. Like I just wanted to give her this kind of nourishing homecoming that I think she didn't think that she would ever have, but there they are and they're still there and they still love her. And then, she has the thing with the truck and Eugene's dock. So she gets
that was so good. So satisfying to read.
Yeah. So she makes a statement. She like shows him she's powerful. And then the woods, I think, are always going to be a sacred place for Sarah. And so I definitely see her taking Emily in the future, especially if Spencer stays there, and which I think he will. And then also, I'll mention that in one of my drafts, I had Sarah go to Guerneville. Like instead of making the phone call, I had her drive. And she walked around and she like saw everything and she went to the house, but Sarah didn't come to the door. And then she left again. And I really liked that, but it just felt sort of like clunky in the book to have her like, it's a really long drive. Like it just felt like too much, like it wasn't quite necessary. So I changed it and made it, part of her dream that she has. So she doesn't go there, but I wanted her to.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. So this is my last like personal question, and then we're going to move into the rapid fire round.
Okay.
And for everyone on the call, if you have any questions for Nina, you can put them in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we will definitely ask them. So chat away. And last question of mine. So I know you are a seasoned teacher and lecturer for those who are embarking on their own writing journeys and writing their first novels. And that's such an incredible service to offer. And for those of you who are on the call, go on Nina's website because they're like courses and you can learn so much from her. So Sapph-Lit has its own group of writers called Sapph-Lit Writers. And if there's any queer writers on the call who may be on this journey for themselves, do you have any like words of wisdom or advice for those of us who are like, starting out?
Yeah. I love this question. So I created my own class called the Slow Novel Lab, which has gone through many different forms over the last few years. And I would say though that like the core of my philosophy in this course is all about like trusting your intuition and also trusting that your way of seeing the world is special enough to carry your story. So one of the biggest concerns that I hear from writers is like, how do I make my story special enough? Like, here is this, I'm writing, let's say like the story of like two teen girls falling in love. But that's been done before so many times. Like, what makes mine different? Or should I even write the story because it's a story that's been told? And my real belief that I come back to is just that if we each understand that the way that we see the world is different from everybody else's way of seeing the world, and we focus on that and really lean into that and trust that, the way that you describe things and the way that you can capture an emotion or a certain situation, those little nuances, like the lens through which you're telling the story, is enough to make it really special and worth writing. And then also, just the more we can quiet these voices that challenge everything that we're writing and, or the inner critic voices, the more we can just say like, this is interesting. Like I must be writing this for a reason. Let's continue to explore and to see, the more that we can just trust ourselves, the better off we are and the more enjoyable the process is too.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So short questions, short answers, whatever comes to mind. All right. What are you currently reading?
I am currently reading a new book. It's called, well, let's see, actually, I'm reading two new books. I'm going to talk about one that would be especially good for you all. It is called, this is where, it's called Lesbian Love Story. and it is by my publicist, actually, Amelia Pisanza. And it's so good. It's, I'll just say a little bit about it. It's like Amelia was kind of searching for lesbians throughout history. And it's so hard to find, you know, historical records. And she did like such a deep dive into learning all she could about lesbians. And so she wrote this book that's like part history, but then like part just like her own journey and her own like craving for finding lesbian love stories in the past. And so it's like part memoir, part history, part like fantasy and recreation of what might have been. And it's absolutely beautiful.
I'm going to email her after this and see if I can get myself a copy of that, because that sounds wonderful and something that we should definitely read as a book club.
I agree.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
What is a book that you recommend everyone read?
I loved Michelle Hart's book, We Do What We Do in the Dark. Have you all read that yet?
Haven't. It has been in a poll of ours. We like vote on the books that we read every single month. And I'm staring at it. It's like right now, and I have not read it, but I definitely will.
Yeah, I really love it. I think it's so beautifully written.
Beautiful. What is a book that's going to be published soon that you're very excited to read?
Oh, well, Amelia's was the one. Amelia's isn't out yet, so I get to use that one twice.
Got it. Perfect. Did you take up a unusual quarantine activity?
Well, I started playing the ukulele. I had one before, but I took a ukulele class.
Oh my God, I love that so much.
It was so lovely because it's this man taught the class, and it was like he would like have us like stand up and walk around the room and like pay attention to the pattern of our steps and our strumming. And he was just like very just kind of relaxed about it all, and just like be gentle with yourself. If you're having trouble, slow down. Like all of these beautiful things that just apply to life in general.
Sounds like the Bob Ross of ukuleles.
Definitely, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Favorite class that you took at school or university?
I took a Virginia Woolf class, and that's where my wife and I met, actually. So it will always be my favorite.
That's so, wait, who made the first move? Like, did you sit next to each other in class? Like, did you pass notes?
We did all of those things. In the beginning, she sat in the front very studiously, and I sat in the back with my two friends, not very studiously. And then slowly we like made her come back to us until she sat in the back row with us.
So cute. I love that. Do you have a favorite movie or TV show that has sapphic representation?
Oh, well, I'm watching A League of Their Own right now, which I'm enjoying so much. Yeah, so I'm still early, so no spoilers from any of you, but I'm really loving it. And I also loved Vita, the TV show. I'm giving two TV answers. Vita, like I feel like barely anyone has seen it, but it's so good and very queer. Okay, so I recommend that, VIDA.
I've heard of A League of Their Own so much because everyone in Sapph-Lit is talking about it currently. And I have continually been peer pressured by the fellow Sapph-Litties to watch TV shows with queer rep. Like The Wilds was one that everyone made me watch.
Oh, cool.
Yellow Jackets. So I'm adding A League of Their Own and Vita to my list.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite sapphic celebrity or like person that you follow on social media that you think is like necessary for everyone?
I feel like I love following, I feel so strange because I don't think I've ever heard her name pronounced, but Cameron hold on. I know she uses she and sometimes her pronouns every morning. Yeah, Cameron Esposito. And every morning there are these like cute videos.
Yes.
Yeah, I think she's really funny and great. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I do know them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was my last rapid fire question. So now we can open to the chat. And we have two from Jimena. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. You can absolutely correct me and clock me for that. So the first one, it's about the end and about Emily's thoughts about Sarah going away, the one that comes when she's at her door. I don't think it's because Sarah says that she wanted to be with Emily when she went home, so maybe it's something in Emily's head. What do you think when, what do you, what do you think, or what were you thinking when you wrote that scene like that?
Mhm. Okay, so I think that, that last moment when Emily's kind of imagining their lives together, I think Emily is, she knows how much she loves Sarah. She feels loved by Sarah. She also, I think, understands who Sarah is, as a person. And I think that something about, being in a long-term relationship with another person is like, we don't stop being the people that we are. And like, we can work hard on noticing the patterns that we have. But that doesn't mean, I think in very rare cases do people completely get over and stop doing the things that they have always done in order to survive. And so I think Emily knows what she's getting into, and she's kind of bracing herself for a journey that might not be the smoothest, but I think that the love that they have for each other is strong and that they have the best intentions for each other. But that Sarah is somebody who runs, that has been her pattern since she was a teenager in one way or another. So I think Emily is just kind of bracing herself for that possibility and knowing that she'll take good care of herself during those times. And so that's what I wanted. I don't think most people have like a happily ever after and their lives were perfect. So I wanted to say like, that's pretty amazing that they can be together, that they want to be together, and we'll see how it goes.
And her second question, it's about Sarah and her feelings about Annie. She says that she's still in love with her. How can she go on and love Emily when Annie is still so present?
Well, I think that it's something that, I think that there's a lot of expansiveness when it comes to love, for one thing. Like, I think that Sarah can love Annie forever and also wholeheartedly love Emily at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that there is something about like how profound both of those experiences of falling in love have been for Sarah that feel intertwined in a way that's kind of mysterious and not really explainable. And I think like when she chooses to tell Emily about it the night before she leaves, I think Sarah doesn't know how Emily will take it. And I think Emily takes it very well and understands, how incredible the bond that Sarah and Annie had and how huge that loss was. And even though some people might feel like very strange about the idea that the person they love loves you, but also thinks about this other person from their past. But I think Emily accepts that about Sarah. And I think that's something that's like very beautiful about their relationship. So, so I think it works.
No, I love your point saying that love is expansive. And I think that's such a like central theme to a lot of queer stories is thinking of love as, not finite.
Yeah.
And being able to hold love for so many different kinds of relationships and people. I love that. Okay, back to the chat. Dorothea, again, so sorry if I'm mispronouncing people's names. I'm curious if Nina's daughter has or will read her books, and if Nina has feelings about that. In general, is it vulnerable to have loved ones read your work?
Yeah, it is vulnerable for sure. With Yerba Buena, it was quite vulnerable just like having my family members read it, and especially like my aunt who really took care of my grandparents like before they died. And like I hoped that I did justice, to the memories, and I hoped that like Emily's, like the house, like the garage apartment that was kind of falling down, stuff like that. Like I didn't want to offend anybody. It did feel vulnerable. And also like these kind of tough things that I'm writing about, or even like sex scenes, like all of that feels like so funny for family members to read. In terms of my daughter, she is just like the best. So yes, she has read my books. I wrote a picture book called Mama and Mommy and Me in the Middle that was based on the experience of my wife and I both. Like my wife used to travel for work all the time, and then I would travel a lot, pre-pandemic. And like, so she's used to kind of having one of us be away, and that's a hard experience for a kid, like when they're missing a parent. So she is like very central in that story, and very proud to have this like beautiful picture book now that's like about her life in a way. And she, of course, hasn't read Yerba Buena because she's 9, but she did listen to the audiobook of my novel, We Are Okay, which is my most beloved YA novel. And I just kind of like, I was like, I don't know, it's not really for your age, but whatever, go ahead. And she loves it. She talks about it all the time. She says I'm her favorite author. It's just absolutely like the sweetest.
Oh my God, that is so tender. What's her name?
Her name's Juliet.
Juliet. Oh, she's lovely.
And I have a chapter book series coming out like next year. And she's like that chapter book's biggest fan, and has read drafts and helped me, has critiqued
beta reader ever. So cute. Madison wants to know, do you have any favorite resources for learning about Creole culture?
That's such a good question. I find it very hard. Like I do have a couple books. Unfortunately, they're not on my desk because I'm not in my office, but like big historical books on Creole culture that are like, I am not a historian, and I am not like, it's hard for me to read kind of dry nonfiction. I'm like a story person. Yeah. So my favorites tend to be just like looking online. Like there are such good articles. There are like nice write-ups about like Creole culture in LA, which is really what I'm mostly focused on. Like, right after the Great Migration, like there was a whole neighborhood that was like the little New Orleans, which is no longer there, but had a lot of Creole businesses. So I tend to like finding kind of more, bite-sized things than like the big deep dives, but there are certainly big dense books out there with tons of information. And then my dad is like really into genealogy. So I like, luckily I have like a lot of primary source materials. Like he found this great interview with my great grandmother, like when she was like doing some stuff in the court system, like it very interesting. But yeah, I like kind of exploring around and not reading the huge dense things.
Yeah, no, vibes, absolutely.
Yeah.
My last question before we wrap, are you going to go to New Orleans for research for your next novel?
I am, yeah. I've been once before and I loved it. And I had such an interesting experience of like really feeling like a connection to this place I had never been to before, and walking around and looking at so many people who look like my family members and like my, great, uncles and aunts, and just, it was really beautiful. It felt very beautiful. So I am planning to go back. Probably I'll go in like the springtime or something.
Yeah, perfect. I've been to New Orleans twice, and it's wonderful. So that'll be very fun. And I hope Juliet can go as well.
Yeah, she came the first time and it was quite the whirlwind. It was a few years ago, and she has a lot of energy. It was quite the experience.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nina. This was such an incredible conversation. And every time I do these interviews, I feel like I have to go back and reread the book. So that's definitely on my to-do. And we will absolutely keep an eye out for your next novel. That will be a definite Sapph-Lit pick. And great. I hope we can have you back and have the best time with your family and have a wonderful party.
Thank you. Thank you all so much, Nina. Thank you for the wonderful questions, and everyone, thank you for your questions and really sweet comments, and thank you all.
Awesome. All right, everyone, have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Bye.